In 1941, following the brutal and lightning-fast German invasion of the Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa, the Soviet military suffered devastating, immense losses in personnel and equipment. Desperate to mobilize every available resource, the Soviet High Command took a unique and unprecedented step, authorizing the formation of female combat units, something no other major nation sanctioned at the time. Thousands of young Soviet women, driven by intense patriotism and a deep desire for vengeance, volunteered for active service, ready to take up arms, fly fighter planes, and engage the enemy on the front lines, defying traditional military roles worldwide. The driving force behind the integration of women into combat aviation was Major Marina Raskova, a celebrated Soviet aviator and renowned national hero who possessed deep political influence. Raskova personally petitioned Joseph Stalin to allow the creation of all-female air units. Recognizing the vast reservoir of talent and determination, Stalin granted her permission to form 3 such regiments. From thousands of eager volunteers, the women were meticulously selected and organized. The unit that would become historically legendary was the 46th Guards Night Bomber Aviation Regiment, composed entirely of women, from the flight mechanics and armorers to the navigators and pilots, averaging just 20 years of age. The aircraft assigned to the regiment was perhaps the most crucial and peculiar aspect of their mission, the Polikarpov Po-2 biplane. This aircraft was already decades old, an obsolete, slow, open-cockpit trainer biplane constructed mostly of plywood and canvas. It offered no armor protection, no radio communication, and rarely carried parachutes for the crew, having been designed as a simple trainer. The profound irony of this choice became the regiment's greatest tactical advantage. The Polikarpov Po-2 was so slow, with a top speed often less than 95 miles per hour, that the modern, fast German Air Force, Luftwaffe, fighter planes struggled immensely to slow down enough to engage them without stalling their own superior aircraft. The regiment officially became the 46th Guards Night Bomber Aviation Regiment, flying exclusively under the cover of darkness. The German Wehrmacht soldiers quickly recognized the terrifying effectiveness of the female pilots and, out of a combination of fear and grudging respect, bestowed upon them the famous, chilling nickname, Nachtwechseln, night witches. This chilling nickname stemmed from the sound of their unmuffled engines. As the pilots cut the engines and glided silently over their targets before dropping their small payloads, the canvas wings made a soft, ghostly whooshing sound, which the German soldiers likened to the sound of witches flying on broomsticks. The young women embraced the fear they inspired, flying up to 18 grueling combat missions every night to relentlessly plague the German lines. The missions undertaken by the 46th Guards Night Bomber Aviation Regiment were brutal, often suicidal, and exclusively conducted under the deep cover of darkness. The Polikarpov Po-2 biplane, while slow, possessed a unique advantage in nighttime operations. Its wooden and canvas construction made it almost invisible to German radar, which struggled to detect non-metallic objects. This meant the planes could often slip through enemy air defenses completely undetected, arriving over their targets without warning. However, navigating and bombing in pitch-black conditions, without modern instruments or radio, was an immense challenge that demanded exceptional skill and nerves of steel from the young female crews. Each pilot and navigator had to rely on a primitive but highly effective navigation system. Using little more than basic maps, compasses, and the dim light of a flashlight held in their mouth, the navigators would guide their pilots to the targets. They would follow railway lines, rivers, and the faint, familiar outlines of villages. Bombing was an equally rudimentary affair. The planes lacked bomb sights, so the navigators would calculate their drop points based on airspeed and altitude, then manually release their small bombs, typically just 2 to 4 small bombs, weighing only 50 to 100 kilograms each, by pulling a lever from their open cockpits. This precision bombing under such conditions was a testament to their rigorous training and intense focus. The tactics developed by the Night Witches were both ingenious and terrifyingly effective, specifically designed to exploit the limitations of their slow aircraft and the cover of night. Their signature tactic was to approach the target at high altitude, then cut their engines completely, gliding silently towards the enemy positions. The sudden, eerie silence was often the first indication the German Wehrmacht had of their presence. Just before dropping their bombs, the pilots would restart their engines, creating a startling, ear-splitting roar that would terrify the soldiers below, before releasing their payload and accelerating away into the darkness, leaving a trail of chaos and psychological fear. The psychological impact of these night raids on the German Wehrmacht was immense. The relentless, unpredictable nature of the attacks, often carried out by single aircraft, prevented German soldiers from getting any consistent sleep or rest. The constant threat of the ghostly whoosh of the biplanes and the sudden explosions created a profound sense of terror and vulnerability. The German Air Force, Luftwaffe, expended considerable resources attempting to shoot down these seemingly primitive aircraft, often with little success. The Night Witches were not just destroying targets, they were systematically breaking the morale of the enemy through a unique combination of courage, ingenuity, and psychological warfare, enduring freezing temperatures and relentless anti-aircraft fire with every mission. Life for the Night Witches of the 46th Guards Night Bomber Aviation Regiment was one of constant, brutal hardship and relentless danger. Their operations were exclusively nocturnal, meaning their days were spent sleeping in makeshift tents or damp dugouts near their remote airfields, only to awaken and fly through the terrifying darkness each night. The lack of proper facilities, combined with the freezing conditions of the Eastern Front and the relentless demands of constant combat, pushed the young women to their absolute physical and mental limits. Each night, they flew mission after mission, knowing that every flight could be their last. The Polikarpov Po-2 biplane offered no protection from the elements. The open cockpits exposed the pilots and navigators directly to the freezing winds and often sub-zero temperatures, especially at high altitudes. Frostbite was a constant threat, and the women often returned from missions with numb limbs and faces. Their light uniforms, not designed for open cockpit night flying, provided little insulation. Adding to the danger, the planes were not equipped with parachutes to save weight, meaning a direct hit from anti-aircraft fire or a successful interception by a German Air Force fighter meant certain death without any chance of escape. The continuous nature of their missions was staggering. Each pilot would fly up to 10 to 18 sorties every single night, with only brief pauses back at the makeshift airfield to refuel and reload their bombs. This meant they were constantly in the air, enduring enemy fire, navigating by flashlight, and repeatedly risking their lives. The constant stress, the extreme exhaustion, and the ever-present threat of death took an immense toll on their bodies and minds. Many returned from missions with their planes riddled with bullet holes, a testament to the accuracy of the German anti-aircraft gunners, who desperately tried to shoot them down. Despite these immense, life-threatening challenges, the morale and dedication of the Night Witches remained extraordinarily high. They understood the critical importance of their missions in supporting the Soviet Army ground forces. They viewed themselves as avengers for their homeland, striking fear into the heart of the enemy night after night. Their camaraderie and mutual support were legendary, as they formed unbreakable bonds in the face of unimaginable adversity. Their quiet heroism and relentless dedication to duty, often flying missions that male pilots deemed suicidal, earned them a fearsome reputation on the Eastern Front. The relentless and effective night attacks of the 46th Guards Night Bomber Aviation Regiment caused immense frustration within the German Wehrmacht. The small, seemingly harmless biplanes tied up significant anti-aircraft resources and severely disrupted German logistics and sleep. The German Air Force was forced to implement specific countermeasures, deploying specialized night fighter squadrons, such as those flying the powerful Messerschmitt Bf-110 and the Junkers Ju-88, which were equipped with early radar and optimized for night combat. Hunting down the slow, non-metallic Polikarpov Po-2 became a high priority, yet incredibly frustrating, assignment for the German night fighter pilots. The difficulty for the German interceptors was rooted in the extreme difference in airspeed. The modern German fighters were built for rapid speed, often cruising at speeds 4 or 5 times faster than the Polikarpov Po-2. To effectively engage the biplane, the German pilots had to execute a dangerous, drastic slowdown, often dropping their landing gear and lowering their flaps to prevent their superior aircraft from stalling or dangerously overshooting the slow target. This maneuver made the powerful German fighters highly vulnerable, difficult to control, and presented a slow-moving target for the gunner-navigator in the rear seat of the Polikarpov Po-2 if the Soviet crew decided to fight back. The Night Witches were masters of evasion, expertly exploiting this speed discrepancy. Their key defensive tactic was not speed, but unpredictable, radical maneuverability. Upon being targeted, the pilots would execute sharp, erratic turns and sudden dives, effectively using the ground and terrain as a shield. They often flew so low, just above the trees or below the radar threshold, that they were effectively below the optimal firing angle of German anti-aircraft guns. Their silent glide tactic, cutting the engine and dropping onto the target, ensured that by the time the German fighter pilot realized the target was fully in range, the Polikarpov Po-2 was already diving away or was virtually invisible against the dark terrain. Tactical teamwork amplified the terror they inspired. The Night Witches rarely attacked in large formations. Instead, they employed a highly effective system of coordinated, sequential attacks. A lead plane would fly over a target, deliberately drawing all enemy searchlights and anti-aircraft fire to itself. The second plane, flying minutes behind and flying silently, would drop its bombs directly onto the now illuminated target area. The third aircraft would then often follow with a final, silent surprise run. This methodical, relentless system, where each plane acted as both bait and attacker, kept the German Wehrmacht ground troops awake, confused, and constantly under the terrifying shadow of an unseen enemy. The real strategic power of the 46th Guards Night Bomber Aviation Regiment was not measured in the size of their bombs, but in the devastation they inflicted on German Wehrmacht morale. The incessant nature of the attacks, often several times an hour throughout the night, completely deprived German ground troops of rest, leading to massive sleep deprivation, reduced combat effectiveness, and intense psychological strain. The terrifying whooshing sound of the Polikarpov Po-2 biplanes gliding over their positions became synonymous with the arrival of fear and death. The German soldiers could never predict where or when the next small, silent bomb would fall, causing widespread panic and utter frustration. The German High Command was so intensely frustrated by the constant harassment and the successful evasions of the Night Witches that they offered massive rewards to any German Air Force pilot who could successfully shoot down one of the primitive biplanes. The bounties were significant, demonstrating the high priority placed on eliminating the regiment. Despite the rewards, the German pilots often found the task nearly impossible, leading to further humiliation and anger among the Luftwaffe. The women, acutely aware of the price on their heads, relied even more heavily on their low-altitude stealth and the absolute cover of darkness, turning the German financial incentive into a morbid joke. Throughout the war, the 46th Guards Night Bomber Aviation Regiment achieved staggering operational statistics that defied the limitations of their aircraft. They flew over 24,000 combat sorties and dropped approximately 23,000 tons of bombs on German targets, hitting fuel dumps, headquarters, supply trains, and ammunition depots. This incredible output, achieved with aircraft that were obsolete at the start of the war, earned the unit the highest honors. They were awarded the prestigious Guards designation and the Order of the Red Banner for their unmatched service and efficiency on the Eastern Front. The personal sacrifice and operational intensity were immense. The women often had to return from missions with their canvas-covered planes heavily riddled with bullets, yet they would personally assist their mechanics and armorers in patching and repairing the planes in time for the next wave of sorties, flying again within hours. Their willingness to fly without parachutes, which they famously discarded to carry just 1 or 2 extra bombs, underscored the absolute commitment of the Night Witches to their mission. They proved their capacity for command and courage under the most extreme combat conditions, earning universal respect through their sheer effectiveness, and cementing their place as the ultimate pioneers of female military combat command. While the German fighter pilots and anti-aircraft fire posed an ever-present threat, the deadliest enemies of the 46th Guards Night Bomber Aviation Regiment were often the elements and ground obstacles. Flying their slow, light Polikarpov Po-2 biplanes at the required near treetop level to avoid German radar meant that the risk of striking a power line, a tall tree, or a hilltop was immense, especially in the pitch black of night. Accidents in poor weather, including heavy fog, snow, or torrential rain, were common and almost always fatal, as the open cockpit planes lacked the modern instruments necessary for blind flying. The extreme low altitude and simple canvas construction meant that even a minor mishap could shatter the aircraft and its crew instantly. Paradoxically, another major source of tragic losses for the Night Witches was friendly fire. The Polikarpov Po-2 was so small, quiet, and unconventional that Soviet Army anti-aircraft units, operating in darkness and under intense stress, frequently mistook the slow-moving biplanes for low-flying German reconnaissance or attack aircraft. Compounding this terrifying risk was the total lack of radio communication on board the Polikarpov Po-2. The pilots had absolutely no means to identify themselves or warn the ground troops of their approach, leading to heartbreaking instances where these courageous airwomen were shot down not by the enemy they were bombing, but by their own comrades, a devastating internal irony of the war. The sheer navigational feat required for every mission was a silent act of intellectual heroism. Without any directional radio equipment, GPS, or even reliable cockpit instruments, the navigators relied entirely on meticulous calculation, a simple compass, and visual confirmation. They guided their pilots across vast, dark, featureless terrain using only low-light cues, such as the faint outlines of railway tracks, rivers, or prearranged signal bonfires set up by friendly ground troops. Any miscalculation in wind speed or time could result in the plane running out of fuel or accidentally drifting over highly fortified German zones, underscoring the immense, constant pressure on these young navigators to maintain perfect, life-saving accuracy. Despite the continuous barrage of immense risks, from ground obstacles and friendly fire to extreme exposure, the 46th Guards Night Bomber Aviation Regiment was one of the very few original units to remain intact and fully operational from its formation in 1942 until the end of the war in 1945. They fought continuously through the key strategic battles of the Caucasus, the liberation of the Crimea, the push into Poland, and finally, the advance into Germany. Their incredible longevity and resilience meant their final combined operational score was astronomical, making them an indispensable, albeit highly unique, part of the final Soviet Army victory. The relentless pace of the 46th Guards Night Bomber Aviation Regiment was only possible due to the exceptional bravery and skill of individual pilots and navigators who achieved astonishing operational records. Many members were recognized for their heroism, but the highest distinction, Hero of the Soviet Union, was ultimately awarded to 23 members of the regiment. Pilots like Yevdokia Nikulina and Tatyana Makarova became national icons, flying hundreds of successful combat sorties, navigating treacherous skies, and delivering thousands of tons of bombs onto critical German targets. Their personal resilience and immense technical skill became the legendary standard for the entire regiment, proving their capacity to perform at the highest levels of combat aviation. This unparalleled heroism came at a profound cost. Despite their ingenuity in evading German fighters, the regiment suffered significant, painful losses throughout the war. A total of 32 members of the 46th Guards Night Bomber Aviation Regiment were tragically killed in action, either shot down by German flak and night fighters or lost to operational accidents, poor weather, and ground obstacles. The emotional toll of constantly losing close friends and comrades was immense, yet the surviving women maintained their mission tempo, driven by a deep commitment to the Soviet Army and a collective will to see the final defeat of Germany. As the war progressed and the Soviet Army pushed the German Wehrmacht relentlessly westward, the Night Witches moved their makeshift airfields constantly. They established operational bases in the Caucasus, throughout the battles for the Crimea, and later through the fierce fighting in Poland. Their close coordination with the advancing ground forces was essential, as they often provided vital, immediate tactical bombing support to troops engaged in direct contact with the enemy. This continuous relocation and adaptation ensured that the Polikarpov Po-2 remained a highly effective, low-level harassment tool throughout the entire, changing campaign. The final operational phase of the Night Witches paralleled the final collapse of the Third Reich. As the front lines collapsed, their focus shifted to attacking the remaining German headquarters, communication centers, and concentrations of desperate troops deep in Germany and Poland. The regiment flew its last combat mission on May 8, 1945, over Berlin, marking the official end of hostilities. Their participation from the desperate defensive battles of 1942 all the way to the final assault on the German capital demonstrated the full strategic range and longevity of the regiment, ensuring the Night Witches were recognized as one of the most effective and persistent units of the entire Soviet Air Force. By the end of World War II, the 46th Guards Night Bomber Aviation Regiment had flown an astonishing 24,000 combat sorties and dropped 23,000 tons of bombs. This unparalleled operational record, achieved with outdated aircraft and under extreme conditions, solidified their legendary status in military history. The regiment was finally demobilized in October 1945, and its surviving members, many of whom had joined the war as teenagers, returned to civilian life. Their experiences, however, had transformed them, making them pioneers in a military landscape that had previously excluded women from direct combat roles. The legacy of the Night Witches immediately extended beyond the battlefield. Their incredible courage, ingenuity, and tactical effectiveness shattered conventional gender barriers in military aviation and inspired millions. They proved beyond any doubt that women were not only capable of flying combat missions, but could excel in the most dangerous and demanding roles, demonstrating strategic value and tactical superiority. Their example paved the way for future generations of women in military service, breaking down traditional perceptions of what female soldiers could achieve in direct combat. The psychological impact on the German Wehrmacht remained a chilling testament to their effectiveness. Long after the war, many former German soldiers recounted the terror and frustration caused by the Nachwechseln, detailing the sleep deprivation and the constant fear of the whooshing sound of the Polikarpov Po-2 biplanes. The fact that the Germans, even with their superior technology, could not effectively counter these slow, canvas planes, became a source of lasting humiliation for the Luftwaffe and a source of fierce pride for the Soviet Union. Today, the story of the Night Witches is celebrated worldwide as one of the most unique and inspiring narratives of World War II. Their sacrifices, strategic contributions, and pioneering role are honored in museums, books, and films. Their legend serves as a powerful reminder that heroism knows no gender, and that true courage can overcome even the most formidable technological disadvantages. The 46th Guards Night Bomber Aviation Regiment stands as an enduring symbol of Soviet resilience and the profound impact of women in combat, a legacy of fearless flight and an unbreakable spirit that continues to inspire